No, we appealed, and we got a letter saying we didn't accept your appeal. We appealed.
So there's no opportunity to talk about why it was that your service provider got 6 out of 18? Do you
Correct.
have no idea why
idea.
that is? Okay.
Just a black box, unfortunately, because we clearly articulated how we met it. I think with minimum 4 years, they've been in business 12. They serve, they're one of the lead homeless service providers in Sacramento that literally works directly contracted with the VA to house homeless veterans with VASH. They've housed over 300 veterans. They provide case management, supportive services. They literally do very innovative things too, just buying buildings, buying houses, putting people in. Anyway, it's just unclear, and maybe I need to have a service provider like you, because you certainly have a good track record of winning all the funding. So, I understand that there is a specific. I understand, and I respect the culture, but I think you can't do it all, right? I can't do it all. We all have to work together. And I think this togetherness is going to get us the results we need, because where we may have opportunity sites that can get cap and trade funding, that can leverage 9% tax credits, that can do all these things that, frankly, bring more resources to the table. I think we need to seize that opportunity. I think we need to look at a balanced approach, because I think from the veterans that I do know, that I've spoken with, that I've gotten to know over the years, it's a range. Whether I was chatting with a gentleman in Pittsburgh who I promised to build housing for because he's a homeless veteran from the Vietnam War, and he's just like, I need it. I don't have it. I need something now. There's a whole range of individuals, and I think because of that, I think there's a whole range of opportunities and solutions. And I think as diverse as the state is, I think we have a lot of opportunity, whether it be in Riverside, whether it be in San Francisco or in East Contra Costa. There's a lot of different opportunities, and I think the challenge too is these areas though don't have the resources of, say, Los Angeles, for example. We could see that in this current round, Los Angeles got, frankly, a lot of the share of the funding, quite honestly, because I think they have, of course, the most resources. They are the largest city in California. They have the most resources. They are creating even more resources. And, of course, they have the greatest homeless population as well. So we understand all of that. But at the same time, there are homeless vets, in Eureka or in, other rural areas that I also build in that I've heard a great demand for, too. And those areas are absolutely resource poor. They have nothing. They don't have a single VASH voucher. They don't have any Section 8. They don't have anything. They can't even ante up. They can't compete whatsoever. And yet there are a number, partly because there's lower cost of living in these communities, in the mountain communities, in the Sierras, for example. A lot of vets that are living out there that travel down to Stockton's VA. It takes them an hour and a half to get down there. And yet they would greatly appreciate it. They talked to me. They said, can you please build us some housing here in Jamestown? Because there are vets here. Yet resources are not. So again, I just hope we look at the state as a total and not set it up that, unfortunately, only the areas that have the greatest resources win all the time. And several of us are entrepreneurial. I think we hear lots of entrepreneurialism in terms of how we're stretching every dollar and how we're making things work, but we need tools. And if we're all shut out because we don't have VASH vouchers worth 20 points when no one's getting them, what are we doing? And I think we're coming up with different resources that they don't quite seem to fit in the regulations, therefore they're discounted. So I'm hoping as a solution, to me, we have to put everything on the table. And if everybody's in, we're all going to be looking at these solutions. And there are different ways to approach every problem. And I think there are a lot of nonprofit providers, social service providers who are very much geared up to want to be part of the solution. And maybe they don't have, the years of experience as, say, your group does, but they are, they certainly have the minimum requirements, and they have experience and commitment and passion and resources. That I feel like if they're coming in with resources, like I've got great partners who are like, I can tap into Medi-Cal. There's a woman I'm talking to now, she's like, we already get Medi-Cal funding, so she's going to bring us Medi-Cal and other sources. So we're already going out there trying to bring it in. But again, if these guys are only getting 6 points out of 18 from lead service provider scoring, they can't bring their resources to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the maximum number of points anybody can score under that system, do you know?
I think it's 133 points from what I recall in the supportive housing section.
Okay.
And then I thought it was was it 100?
So 18's been allocated to the lead service provider.
Yes.
133.
133 was that. And then there were the other
points altogether total.
80. 80 was the
80
other
is
one.
if it's your maximum points if you're not supportive housing or transitional housing.
Got it. All right. Ms. Brown, go ahead.
I think that's why I was asking the question about the experience earlier. What do you need for experience? And it sounds like there's some kind of disconnect, because we understand experience was one thing, and you're coming back with all this experience, but it's not being counted. So I think we really need to probably look at that and see what needs to happen. I know in San Bernardino, we probably wouldn't qualify. I don't know if you put anything in San Bernardino, but we probably wouldn't qualify because we don't have the people.
We're in San Bernardino.
Oh, good. Oh, good. All right.
60 units of permanent housing.
Where is it at?
Static site.
So you're already there?
Yeah, we're already there.
Okay, good. San Bernardino doesn't have the people in San Bernardino that can actually qualify by writing the grants for many of the programs. And usually it's someone who's a larger entity that comes into San Bernardino and sets up the programs. So I understand what you're saying about, and I'm glad to hear you're in San Bernardino.
We as part of CAFSA, we fought really hard for that service provision because we understand that if that service is not provided, those veterans are not going to succeed. In the VASH program nationwide, a significant number of those veterans are falling out because there is not adequate support services. So taking that lesson, we were very insistent that a quality service provider be part of that project, that they can't send them down the street to the VA. They can't put together a range of services somewhere out in the community. It has to be on site. And that's the way that we're going to get them into housing and keep them into housing and improve their quality of life.
And you were talking about Los Angeles, and I think in Los Angeles, the mayor himself made this a big issue. And he said, we're going to reduce homeless veterans by so many, he says by such a year. So there's really a will in some cities to do it, and in other cities, they're struggling with other issues. Thank you.
Mr. Peck, I have a couple questions. Did you mention that the second set of guidelines issue included the redefinition or refinement of the term culturally competent?
It did. It separated out some of those criteria into, I think Teresa can answer this, to 6 or 8 different categories. So you could look at it and see what aspect of that service provision you weren't strong in.
And you're okay with the redefinition or the amended definition?
The more closely it's defined, the better for me. And as I said, we through our 22 years of experience, we obviously know what the lay of the land and what veterans their issues are and what the service provision is, and it's that veteran specific system takes a lot of experience and knowledge to learn it. So I think which is why we were so insistent on having those criteria in there.
Thank you. And Mr. Trimble, just to focus in on your suggestion on the flexibility, quote unquote, or the split system that you mentioned earlier, and if I'm understanding the concept correctly, so you're proposing basically to allow a little more flexibility when it comes to granting these funding by, for example, by approving different business models, for example, and instead of the current scoring system. Is that essentially what you're suggesting?
Essentially, it's suggesting, so you have an MHP model, you have an EHAP model, you have a MHSA model, you have all these different models that are tried and true within the state of how you finance real estate development.
Right.
For a veteran service provider that's going to act as the lead developer, having the ability to follow the EHAP model, which is a forgivable residual receipts loan at the end of whatever the period that you want to set, and used as construction financing, could be much more valuable. For an affordable housing developer, you may want the MHP model, which is you have the funds at the back end, or maybe you use it at the front. But yes, give yourself some flexibility rather than just saying, okay, everything has to go through this one program,
Right.
because you're trying to get out as many veteran units as possible. The way that you do it and the way that we do it are totally different. We all want to get to the same spot.
Right.
Yes, give yourself some flexibility in how you let the money out.
So that
Having
would-
construction dollars is huge.
So that would involve the altering of the current scoring system in some way.
Yes, sir. It would actually be almost as if it's two different application processes, if you will. Here's an MHP process, which is what we have in essence today.
Right.
And here's the old EHAP. This is the way EHAP ran.
Right.
Now it's just being funded with VHHP funds.
So the different model will be incorporated into the proposal that's submitted by. So it will require a case-by-case determination, on the part of.
As simple as, you have the universal application that we all have to fill out on the front cover. It says what kind of funds are you going to use.
Okay.
I want to use EHAP, VHHP/EHAP. I want to use VHHP/MHP. Or something as simple as that. And so, okay, that's the EHAP model. Let's score it this way. This is the MHP model. Let's score it that way.
Okay,
It's more work for HCD, granted.
Got it. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Go ahead. You have a
I
comment?
really like his suggestion. I really do, because we're talking about getting the money out to veterans. We're getting it out the door so that they can be served. Sounds really like something we should pursue. And I have to go. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you for joining us, Ms. Brown. Yeah. Are there any further questions, Ms. Irwin? If there are no further questions, I want to thank the panelists for joining us today and sharing with us your expertise. And please continue to stay in touch with us and provide us with your input. Whether or not you have already provided or new input, please let us know, because we do take those into consideration as well. So I think the folks. Yes, we do want to do a couple of comments. And I think the representatives from the three agencies are still here. I think one of them is still here. So, well, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, let's go to public comment. And if you'd like to make comments, please step forward.
Teresa Gunn, I'd like to stand up and just address some of the testimony you just heard and try and give some additional perspective that the applicants obviously didn't have when it came to the scoring system. So I know that there's some frustration over the lead service provider points, and a very small portion of those points, 6 of the 18, were specific to, or if you served veterans specifically as part of your client population over a period of time. The entirety of the points was really to vet out, have you provided services over a period of time? Have you been successful? Several of the points were you successful over several years in your outcomes for the contracts that you have? It also was a test to, would you be able to bring in the funding to run your services as a lead service provider? Someone who's been there stable over a period of time, has learned how to work through the systems, understands the funding, has some sort of momentum behind them in theory to help with some of this funding, lack of funding, I should say, that we have. I can tell you that the applicants, and there were quite a number of them who had trouble in this area, most likely as a fault of how quickly everything had to come together for this round. Lost points mostly because they didn't provide the documentation to support their years of service. So they were required to provide the contracts that showed that they had services over a certain period of time. And the contracts that were submitted were incomplete if they were submitted at all, or they weren't, they didn't contain all the pages that were necessary. They weren't signed off by all the parties involved. There are a whole number of different issues around there, and quite a few of the 30 applicants did not get full points in that arena. And contrary with the leverage operating reserve, I agree with Ms. Kane. There was a flaw in our system. We totally heard that in our feedback sessions. We had inadvertently only allowed for formalized operating reserve sorts of funding streams, such as VASH or Section 8, or putting the cash in the bank, and not for you to be able to operate on a cash basis. And we are correcting that in this next round when we go through that. Am I missing it? Oh, that's right. Sorry. Just trying to remember all the different pieces. So when I had stepped up here a minute ago, there was confusion over how many points there were throughout the whole process. So projects that had permanent supportive housing had a total of 133 points. Projects that had transitional housing had just under that, pointing right around 105. And affordable housing also reached to the 105 points. I know Ms. Kane was disgruntled in our new guidelines that for the plain affordable, they had to have a minimum score of 50 points in our first round to be able to be funded. They had access or ability to reach to 100 points. Many of the projects didn't get anywhere near there, and some of that was a factor of the leveraging of the operating system where we had that flaw that cost some people some points, and we've tried to correct that in this next round. And because we think we have corrected that is why we bumped up that minimum threshold to 65 points. So, no, I'm sorry. And the last thing is no project was disqualified at all because of their service plan. Projects received different points. Again, as you've heard throughout some of the testimony and within the guidelines, we are streamlining a process, trying to make it easier. It was a very cumbersome application and a very short time frame for people to complete that in. Applications came in probably not in the manner that applicants would have preferred. They had to be written very quickly, and so all of their perspectives or how their plans would be carried out might not have carried through the application as well as they had wanted to. But not a single application was disqualified solely because of their service plan. So, thank you.
Well, thanks for the clarification, Ms. Gann. So with that, next public speaker. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Chow and Irwin, my name is Seamus Roller. I'm the Executive Director of Housing California. I'm here also on behalf of the Corporation for Supportive Housing. In addition to those roles, I also serve as the Board President for the Sacramento County Continuum of Care, and have done a lot of work with sort of thinking about how the Continuum of Care functions within this county. I was also one of the co-chairs of the Prop 41 campaign and involved in the initial sort of negotiations about the Bill 639. I think we're really in support of the guidelines and that we think that they're evidence-based, especially it's focused on housing first and on coordinated entry, which we think are really important pieces. We're a little concerned around some of the guidelines around lead service providers. I think some of the challenges is that some of this is about your experience on units that are reserved for veterans, where many of our service providers are serving veterans in units that aren't reserved for veterans. In addition, unfortunately, so many homeless service providers really do have experience working on veterans because such a large percentage of the population that they're working with are veterans. And I think that some of the guidelines and the way that they're structured really, don't. It's difficult to document that in some cases, especially veterans, in the expansive way in which we defined it within this program, don't want to identify themselves and don't want to do it right away through some of the intake processes, and will later on. So just want to make sure that as we think about that piece and we think about cultural competency, we think about the people in our communities who really know how to serve veterans and also know how to serve homeless veterans. And having worked my career working on homelessness is also a cultural competency. And the thinking about how we serve people that are homeless is really crucial in thinking about designing this program. We really recommend that HCD, CalVet, that HFA consider looking at a training program to make sure that all the lead service providers have training both in cultural competency around serving veterans and also around serving people that are homeless. We also are really strongly in support of the Housing First model, both in tenant selection, in the application process, in service provision, and in the management side of things. This is the evidence-based. We've spent 20 years looking at how moving people into housing with very limited barriers is the way to end homelessness. It's supported by HUD. It's supported by Veterans Affairs. It's supported by the Interagency Council on Ending Chronic Homelessness. It's really, I think, the way in which we're going to serve the people that are most vulnerable in our communities, which I think this program is what it's about. So thank you for this hearing and for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who would like to make comments?
Yes, Peter Cameron. I'm president of Veterans Resource Centers of America, a member of California Association of Veterans Service Agencies. I'd just like to make a couple points here. Our agency is in 3 states. In California, we have 9 sites. We serve about 8,000 in California alone, a total of 15,000 veterans. We have a major site, Sacramento Veterans Resource Center here, and I'd like to reach out to you, be more than happy to sit down and talk to you, give you a tour of our facility, and share our secrets that we've known for in my case, over 43 years. So, in fact, we started in the 70s. We were recognized by the White House as a national model for community services. So, and I'd also like to invite you to join us, the California Association of Veterans Service Agency, in going to the federal government and getting us those HUD-VASH vouchers. It's going to take a real team effort to tie those up. It's going to take the legislature. It's going to take a whole bunch of us. As to the final point is, CASVA, California Association, out of our experience, we've actually developed a curriculum for not just cultural competency, but how to run a program, from case management to everything else. And we're going to be rolling that out and be more than happy to talk about that and talk about that with other potential partners. Thank you.
Thank you much. Next. Welcome.
Hi, Sonia Stiers, Director of Government Relations for the Salvation Army's work in California. Thank you. The Salvation Army has a long history of working with and supporting veterans. And in California alone, we have approximately 14 veteran-specific service contracts, totaling, we estimate, about $7 million just in California alone. We have transitional housing, emergency shelter, substance abuse treatment, and permanent housing beds and apartments, as well as operating several non-direct housing programs such as supportive services for veterans' families and homeless veterans registration reintegration program. And with all of that said, we also have approximately 1,200 to 1,300 beds that are filled with men and women each night who are involved in our multiple stage drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs throughout the state of California. It's estimated at this point that approximately 10% of those beneficiaries are veterans that are declaring their status and are veterans of various status. And we do not, for that drug and alcohol program, currently accept governmental funding. However, and I'm just saying this to let you know the extent and the comprehensive nature of the work that the Salvation Army does with veterans, we're beginning to look intentionally at at better recording who are veterans so that as we are looking in the state of California to better support transitioning out of our drug and alcohol program, how we might be very specific in our services to the veterans. With all that in mind, there's a couple things that we want to point out. One is somebody had mentioned the standardization of HMIS and the data collection system. I do know that our IT director, chief, is happy to be part of that conversation and would welcome a standardization across the state, because it's an issue for large organizations such as ourselves as well to get different types of reports, and requires double entry for those organizations such as ours who are recording statistics. So it's a very big issue, and he'll be excited that I was able to chat about that. Also, So we did not apply for the first round of VHHP funding, but are looking to apply for this latest round. Our greatest concern at this point is the qualifier that the gentleman just prior, couple before me mentioned about the veteran-specific organizations as service providers. Given the criteria, there of the 20%, and it's been suggested 30%, with all that the Salvation Army currently does to support and successfully support veterans, there runs a risk that we would be disqualified from future funding. And so we want to consider how, exactly how that looks. And I know that my thought leader in this particular issue has not had an opportunity to look through this most latest NOFA that was released yesterday, but I do know that that is a huge concern for us. And so we want to also just stress the need to look at those qualifiers. And I agree that some type of a training program to develop competency or for certification or whatever it might be would be great. We are looking to apply for this funding in Bell and are excited at the opportunity to provide additional support services to veterans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more? All right.
Hi, my name is Franklin Nolan of Livermore. I'm Miwok. I'd like to propose that all solutions be handled by veterans, for veterans. That way it's self-sustaining, self-supporting, and supports our pride. I guess another way to create more jobs is just use existing rules that we have, such as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, to provide the database software that we need to start with, and then go from there. That's all to say about that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Hearing and seeing none, I want to thank all of you for being here today, and also want to thank my co-chair, Assemblymember Orwin, for partnering up with me. Any final thoughts? Or we good?
I think I'm good.
Very good. Thank you again for joining us, and this meeting stands adjourned.